Two men watched the same tennis crowd this summer. One of them has run one of the biggest tournaments in the world for 20 years. 20 years of finals. 20 years of every kind of audience a sport can produce. Then 10,000 Filipinos filled his stadium in Toronto, and he said he had never seen anything like it in his entire career. The flags, the noise, the pride. The other one never left his keyboard. He called them a zoo. He said tennis used to be a game for gentlemen, and that these people had ruined it. Same crowd. Same week. Two verdicts that cannot both be true. And sitting right in the middle of those two sentences is a question that nobody on television has actually bothered to answer. When 10,000 Filipinos erupt at the exact moment a ball goes into the net, what are they cheering for? Because there are only two possible answers, and they are not the same thing at all. Either those people are celebrating a woman failing, or they are celebrating a woman scoring. One of those makes them cruel. The other one makes them fans. For 7 months, the tennis world has assumed it knows which one it is. Chair umpires have warned them. Broadcasters have scolded them. Opponents have complained about them. And through all of it, the people actually sitting in those seats have said almost nothing back. That changed this week. Not in a press conference. Not on a podium. In comment sections, in group chats, in replies underneath every article written about them, Filipino fans started saying the same sentence over and over, in slightly different words, until it stopped sounding like a defense and started sounding like a correction. We are not celebrating their mistake. We are celebrating her point. Now, you can hear that and think it is a technicality. A convenient excuse. A way to reframe bad behavior into something acceptable after the fact. I thought that too. Then I slowed the footage down. And what is on that tape is not an opinion, it is a sequence. There is an order to what happens in that stadium, and the order matters more than anything anyone has written about it. Because the crowd does not make a sound when Alycia Parks misses. The crowd makes a sound after. Half a second after. That gap is the entire argument. And almost nobody has stopped the tape long enough to look at it. To understand why this argument got so ugly, you need to understand what these people were waiting for. Not a match. A person. For over 100 years of professional tennis, the Philippines did not have one. A country of 120 million people. Not one champion. Not one finalist. Not one name that ever made a stadium anywhere in the world turn its head. If you grew up Filipino and you loved this sport, you loved it from a distance, the way you love a country you have never been allowed to visit. Then a girl from Quezon City started climbing. Alexandra Eala left home at 12. Not for a school. For a tennis academy in Manacor, Spain, run by Rafael Nadal, 5,000 miles from her family. At 17, she won the US Open girls singles title, the first Filipino ever to win a junior Grand Slam in singles. In 2025 she reached the semifinals of the Miami Open and beat two top 5 players on the way. At Wimbledon this year, she knocked out the defending champion, Iga Swiatek, in the third round. And then, on August 3rd, in Washington, D.C., she beat the world number 3, Jessica Pegula, 4-6, 6-4, 6-love. She lost the first set. Rain suspended the match overnight. She came back the next day and won the last set without dropping a single game. First Filipino to win a WTA title. Ever. Man or woman. She is now ranked number 20 in the world, the highest a Filipino has ever been. That is the context. Now here is the part that makes the crowd conversation different from every other crowd conversation in tennis. 2 days later, she arrived in Toronto. The moment the tournament announced which night she would play, tickets for that session sold out in 30 minutes. 10,000 seats. Gone. The tournament director, Carl Hale, said something afterward that I have not been able to shake. He said they had never seen a player ranked outside the top 5 have this kind of effect. Not one. In the history of the event. The demand was so far beyond anything they had planned for that they had to physically move her match. She had originally been scheduled on a smaller court that holds 2,800 people. She had already sold something like 5,000 tickets for that slot. Almost twice the capacity of the court. So they moved her to center court. And center court sold out too. Understand what that means. A 21-year-old seated 25th outdrew the world number 1. And here is the piece that most coverage skipped entirely. Those people were not tourists. Toronto is home to the largest concentration of Filipinos in Canada, almost 30% of the entire Filipino population of the country. They make up nearly 5% of the city. Some of those families have been in that city since the 1960s. When Eala walked onto that court, she was not being adopted by a Canadian crowd. She was being received by a Filipino one that had been waiting there for 60 years. So when the criticism came, it did not land the way tennis criticism usually lands. Because the accusation was not really "you cheered at the wrong time." Read the posts. Read the replies. The accusation, underneath the vocabulary, was "you do not belong in this room." And every immigrant community on earth recognizes that sentence on contact. You do not need it explained. You have heard it about your food, your volume, your accent, your parents, your flags. You have heard it your whole life, dressed up as manners. That is why this got so loud so fast. That is why it stopped being about tennis by day 2. If you have ever been on the receiving end of that particular sentence, in any room, in any country, stay with me through the next few minutes. Because what I am about to lay out is not a comfort, it is an argument. And by the end of it, you will be able to make it yourself, to anyone, and win. So when they finally showed up, all of them, all at once, this sport had a decision to make about how to receive them. And in January, in Melbourne, on a small outside court called Court 6, it made one. I am not going to soften this part. If I do, nothing I say later will mean anything to you. So here is the case against these fans. The strongest version of it. Not from anonymous accounts. From people who were actually in the building. January 19, 2026. Melbourne Park. Australian Open, first round. Alexandra Eala vs Alycia Parks, an American ranked outside the top 70. Eala's first ever main draw match at a Grand Slam. They scheduled it on Court 6. A small court. Organizers clearly did not expect what happened next. Hundreds of Filipino fans poured into Melbourne Park. Lines stretched back toward Rod Laver Arena, the main stadium. There was not an empty spot anywhere, not in the seats, not at the courtside bar, not along the baseline ledges. People stood on anything they could stand on. And the first set was a massacre. Eala won it 6-love. 6-0. Now watch what happened to the person on the other side of the net. Alycia Parks was seen crying. On court. After losing that first set. 25 years old, ranked 71st in the world, playing a first-round match, in tears. She talked about it afterward. She said it was very difficult. She said she had expected the atmosphere, but also somehow had not. She said Eala definitely has a good crowd, and that she kept telling herself to stay in the zone. And then she said the line that matters most. She said she was so focused on the crowd in the first set that it is why the set went the way it went. Sit with that. Not she lost the set. She was focused on the crowd instead of the ball. Then Parks came back and won the match, 0-6, 6-3, 6-2. Which raises the first uncomfortable question. If that crowd was such an overwhelming advantage, why did Eala lose? But that is not even the part that stuck. What went viral out of that match was a single clip. Parks put an easy overhead smash into the net. And the crowd exploded. Not applause. An eruption. For a missed smash. That video traveled around the tennis world in about 6 hours, and the reaction was brutal. Now, here is where I have to be honest with you, because this is the part the defense videos leave out. The chair umpire did not warn that crowd once. He did not warn them twice. According to a column written in spin.ph, a Philippine outlet, not a foreign one, the umpire admonished Eala's supporters no fewer than 6 times. 6. And Parks herself repeatedly asked the umpire to control them. 6 warnings. That is not a moment. A moment is one warning. A moment is a crowd getting swept up once and settling down. 6 warnings across one match is not a moment, it is a pattern inside a single afternoon. And if it had stopped there, you could file it under first Grand Slam, brand new fans, lesson learned. It did not stop there. February. Dubai. 3rd round, against Sorana Cirstea. Same thing, fans cheering missed first serves. And this one is harder to explain away, so let me explain why. When a player misses a first serve, nothing has happened yet. Nobody has won anything. She simply hits a second serve. There is no point on the board. There is no score to celebrate. Cheering there is not celebrating anything except an opponent's difficulty. The umpire had to intervene again. And then this week. Toronto. The match everyone is calling a triumph. Read past the headline. When Eala beat Alycia Parks in Toronto, the chair umpire reminded that crowd several times to keep the noise down. During the match. Again. 3 tournaments. 3 continents. 3 umpires. Same intervention. At this point, you might be waiting for me to tell you that this is all foreign media, that outsiders do not understand Filipino sports culture. That this is a Western sport punishing a non-Western crowd. I would love to tell you that. I cannot. Because the sharpest criticism did not come from outside. It came from a man named Carl Santamaria, former coach of the Philippine national team, and not a stranger to this family. He worked with Eala's first coach, her own grandfather, the man everyone calls Lolo Bob. He sat in the stands in Melbourne, next to Filipino fans, and he tried to teach them the rhythm of the sport in real time as it was happening. Afterward, he said this. There must be respect for the opponent. You do not applaud mistakes. You appreciate good shots, even from the opponent. That is not a British commentator. That is not a rival fanbase. That is a Filipino tennis coach with a direct line to Eala's own family telling his own countrymen they got it wrong. So let us take stock of where this leaves us. An opponent in tears. 6 umpire warnings in one match. The same intervention repeated in Dubai and again in Toronto. And a former Philippine national team coach agreeing with the critics. On paper, this case is closed. Except. Every single one of those accounts describes what the crowd did. Not one of them describes when they did it. Watch it again. Not at full speed. Nothing at full speed will tell you anything. Which is exactly why this argument has gone nowhere for 7 months. Watch the ball. Park sets up under the smash. She swings. The ball comes down and it catches the tape. Right there. Freeze it. Look at that frame. At this exact frame, before one single human being in that stadium has opened their mouth, the point is already over. It already belongs to Alexandra Eala. The scoreboard has already changed. Nothing anyone does now can undo it, cause it, or influence it. The ball is dead. Now let the tape run. The noise arrives here. Half a second later. I want you to understand what that gap actually proves, because it is not a technicality and it is not spin. A crowd cannot react to a mistake before it knows there is a mistake. And in tennis, a mistake and a point are the same event, seen from 2 directions. The instant that ball hits the tape, 2 things become true at the same time. Parks lost the point. Eala won the point. Same frame. Same physics. Same half second. So the only question that has ever mattered is which of those 2 facts that crowd was responding to. And the tape says something very specific. The noise does not come from the section closest to Parks. It does not build slowly, the way a groan builds. It goes off all at once, from everywhere, in the shape of a cheer, at the exact tempo of a scoreboard changing. Let me put it in a language every American already speaks. When a striker misses an open goal in the 90th minute, the away section erupts. Every time. Nobody has ever written a column about it. Nobody has ever called it cruelty. Those fans are not celebrating a man's failure. They are celebrating that it is still 1-0. They are cheering the number on the board. We call that football. And we have never once required anyone to apologize for it. The difference is not the behavior. The difference is who is allowed to do it without being asked to explain themselves. Now, I promised you I was not going to soften anything, and that includes this next part, because if I skip it you should stop trusting me. That argument does not cover everything. It does not cover Dubai. When a player misses a first serve, nothing has been decided. There is no point on the board. Nobody won anything. You cannot claim you are celebrating a score when there is no score. Cheering there is celebrating an opponent's trouble, and there is no honest way to dress that up. It does not cover noise during a live rally either. When the ball is still in play, sound is not celebration. It is interference. That one is not about etiquette or class or who built the sport. It is about a player trying to track a ball at 100 miles an hour. Those things happened. They were wrong. And the fanbase is learning them in public, in real time, in front of the whole world, which is a brutal way to learn anything. So, let us be precise about what is actually true. Some of that criticism was correct. And it was also nowhere near what these people were accused of. Because here is the post that went viral. Here is the one that got shared into every timeline in the tennis world. It starts with this sentence. I hate Filipino people. Then it goes on. They are too rude and have no courtesy. They have ruined this sport. It used to be a gentleman's game. Now it is a zoo. Read that first sentence again. I hate Filipino people. There is no tennis in that sentence. There is no serve, no rally, no point, no umpire, no etiquette. That sentence was true for the person who wrote it before the match started, and it would have been true if the crowd had sat in total silence for 2 hours. Everything after it is scaffolding. And that is the thing I actually want you to take out of this video, because it is bigger than one match. Etiquette language is doing two completely different jobs at the same time in this story, and they have been deliberately blurred together. One job is instruction. Do not cheer a second serve. That job is legitimate and useful, and Filipino coaches were the first ones doing it. The other job is exclusion. Dressing up you do not belong here in vocabulary that sounds like manners, so that nobody can accuse you of what you are actually saying. Same words. Two jobs. And if you cannot tell them apart, you will keep mistaking contempt for correction, which flips the entire question this sport has been asking since January. The question was never, is this crowd rude? The question is, who wrote the silence rule, who does it get enforced against? And does anybody ever get asked to apologize for a stadium in Madrid, in Rome, in Paris, in New York? If you have made it this far, you already have the argument. Tell me in the comments where you land on it, because I genuinely want to see the other side of this one, and that section is going to be more interesting than anything I just said. Now, if the timing read is right, you would expect one very specific thing to be true. You would expect the people who were physically inside that stadium to see this completely differently from the people typing about it. That is exactly what happened. And the names are not who you would guess. Here is what I cannot get past. Every single person with an actual, legitimate reason to resent that crowd defended it. Not some of them, all of them. Start with the one who has the strongest case. Coco Gauff. February, Dubai. Quarterfinal. Gauff vs Eala. Gauff wins 6-love, 6-2. 12 games to 2. A demolition, and she played that entire match inside a stadium that was chanting her opponent's name, not politely supporting Eala. Chanting. Turning a neutral quarterfinal in the United Arab Emirates into something that sounded like a road game. Gauff is a 4-time major champion. She is American. She has every reason in the world to say that crowd was over the line, and if she had said it, the tennis world would have printed it in every language on earth by dinner. She said the opposite. This week, in Toronto, standing a few feet from a draw that could put her across the net from Eala again in the quarterfinals, she said, the demographic that Alex is bringing to the sport of tennis is so great. That is the woman who had to play through it. Now take the man who had the authority to stop it. Carl Hale has been the tournament director in Toronto for 20 years. 20. That is roughly 40 tournaments, thousands of matches, every kind of crowd a major event produces. If anyone on earth has a baseline for what normal looks like in that building, it is him. And he is not a spectator. If that crowd had crossed a line, he is the man who signs the order. Here is what he said instead. He said he has been doing this for 20 years and has never seen such an incredible, alive, enthusiastic, passionate crowd. He said he has never seen that many flags on center court, waving all over the place. He said the stadium erupted when she won, and that it was sensational. And then he said the sentence that ends the argument for me. He said it was just patriotic pride to be Filipino. Express yourself, support your country, carry your flags. That is not tolerance. That is not a tournament director managing a PR problem. That is an invitation. Now the third witness. And this one is the heaviest, because she paid the highest price. Jessica Pegula. World number 3. August 3rd, Washington, D.C. She is standing in a final she has every reason to expect to win, in her own country, and the entire stadium is against her. Rain pushes the match to a second day. Monday finals are rare in tennis, and organizers had almost no reason to expect anyone to come back. They came back anyway. In force. Wearing Philippine colors. Carrying flags. On a Monday, the chairman of that tournament, Mark Ein, said it out loud during the trophy ceremony. He said this might be the greatest crowd for a Monday final anyone has ever seen. Pegula lost that match 6-love in the third set. 6-0, in front of a crowd that was celebrating every single one of them. And afterward, asked about the people who had just spent 2 days cheering against her, she said this. She said it is refreshing and nice to see how well Eala has handled all of the fandom and stardom that has come with being from the Philippines, and how they have really embraced her. She said it is crazy how she deals with it every single week, and that it shows her maturity. Refreshing. That was the word chosen by the woman who lost. So look at what we actually have. The player who beat Eala in front of that crowd defends it. The player who lost to Eala in front of that crowd defends it. The man with 20 years of authority over that building defends it. Now go back to the two men I opened this video with and ask what separates them. It is not expertise, it is not nationality, it is not even which side they were rooting for. It is proximity. Every person on the defending side of this argument was physically inside the stadium. Every person on the harshest end of it was not. That is not a coincidence, and it is not a small detail. It is the whole pattern. If you were there, you heard when the noise arrived. If you were watching a 15-second clip with the audio compressed, you only heard that it arrived. And there is one more thing. This is the detail almost nobody has picked up, and it has been sitting in Hale's quote the entire time. Go back and read what he actually remembered about that crowd. He did not list the volume. He did not mention the umpire warnings, and he would know about every one of them. He mentioned the flags. He mentioned everybody wearing red. And he mentioned the dinosaur guy. Somebody came to a professional tennis match in a dinosaur costume to support a 21-year-old from Quezon City. And the one man in that building with the power to discipline that crowd remembered him fondly enough to bring him up unprompted, in an interview, days later. That is not how you describe a disturbance. That is how you describe a party you enjoyed. Which leaves exactly one question standing. If everyone inside that building already understood this, why did it take a comment section to say it out loud? So, were they wrong? Partly. Yes. You do not cheer a second serve into the net. You do not make noise while the ball is still alive. And the people who love this sport in the Philippines are learning both of those things in public, in real time, with the entire world watching and grading them. That is a brutal way to learn anything. Most fanbases got 100 years of privacy to figure it out. This one got 7 months and a viral clip. But loud is not the same thing as cruel. And a crowd that is new is not the same thing as a crowd that is disrespectful. Those got collapsed into one accusation, and they should never have been. Here is the answer to the question I asked you at the start. Both of those men were describing something real. But they were not describing the same event. One of them was describing what happened in that stadium. The other one was describing how he feels about who was in it. And the silence rule everybody keeps invoking is not a moral law, nobody handed it down. It is an inheritance, from a period when this sport was built for a very specific kind of spectator, in a very specific kind of club, and the quiet was never really about concentration. It was about who the room belonged to. Tennis can keep that rule. There are good reasons to. But it has to enforce it the same way in Melbourne as it does in Madrid, and it has to stop pretending that enforcement and contempt are the same conversation. Because this is not slowing down. Eala is 21 years old. She is ranked 20th in the world with 2 titles this season, and a win over the world number 3. She could meet Coco Gauff in the quarterfinals in Toronto, in front of the same crowd, and if that happens you will hear it from wherever you are watching. And then comes New York. In a few weeks, she plays the US Open, in a city with a Filipino community even larger than Toronto's, in a stadium that seats more than 23,000 people, at a tournament that has spent decades bragging about being the loudest major on earth. Arthur Ashe is famous for noise. It sells itself on noise. The flags are coming. The volume is coming. And this sport is going to have to decide, one more time, what it wants to call that. Whether it is a problem when it is Filipino and an atmosphere when it is not. I am going to be covering every match of that run, and I want to see whether the same commentators use the same word twice. So do 2 things for me. Tell me below what you think the honest answer is here. Because I have laid out my read. And I am genuinely interested in the people who see it differently. And if you want to find out how New York handles this, subscribe? Because that is the story I am following next, and I would rather not lose you between now and then. 2 men watched the same crowd. In 3 weeks, 23,000 people are going to walk into a stadium in Queens, and force everybody to pick one.